Welcome to another episode of Spilling Ink, the talk show that takes you behind the book to meet the authors and professionals in the publishing industry. This week, I've got two Big Five published authors to introduce you to, and they're going to talk a little bit about their experiences submitting their manuscripts and what it's like to be published with a Big Five publisher. So let's get started with tonight's show. Beth, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your books?
Hi, I'm Beth Cato. I'm published with Harper Voyager, which is part of HarperCollins, which is, as she said, one of the Big Five publishers. I have the Clockwork Dagger duology, and I have my current series, which is the Blood of Earth trilogy. The second book in that, Call of Fire, just came out in August. And then coming up in November, I have a short story and poetry collection coming out with Fairwood Press, which is a small press, and that's called Red Dust and Dancing Horses. And you can find out all about me and look at my bibliography and all that at bethcato.com. And I have lots of cookie recipes on there too.
Oh, that's right. You have all of the awesome cookie recipes. Every time you post something on Facebook, I'm just drooling. I want some of those. I need to make it out to the Phoenix area and just sneak into one of your signings just for the cookies.
I always have them there. And when I travel to conventions, I take cookies too.
That is an awesome idea. And it's a great way to introduce yourself to other people and, share something, tasty and delicious.
Oh yeah. And at a convention, people are frantic and rushing from panel to panel. And I'm pretty shy and awkward. So just kind of being able to say, want a cookie is a good way to break the ice.
Icebreaker.
Yeah, it makes me interact too.
I love that. Now, what got you started with all the baking? Because you have all kinds of recipes.
Yeah, I do. I have a food blog called Ready or Not. Every Wednesday I post a new recipe, and I've had it going on since 2012 now. Yeah, it came about as a branding technique. I saw other authors were posting about crocheting or pet ferrets or their pet cat or all this, and I'm like, I have cats, but they're older. They're not as photogenic as they used to be when they were kittens. But I love baking, so I'll see about if people respond to recipes and baking, and it's worked out really well.
Branding is actually an important topic. We brought up many times on our show about being real with your audience, and part of branding is finding something that you are really passionate about and using that to share with your audience. So,
Yes.
Some people like you've got the baking, you've got the awesome recipes. Some people are like me, Doctor Who nerds. So I will talk anybody's ear off about Doctor Who, and I've done that at many conventions. I love talking, the fantasy genre. Wes, let's introduce you for a little bit and find out what you're about.
Well, sure. Hi, how you doing? I'm Weston Ochse. It doesn't look like it's pronounced that way, but I promise you it is. Harlan Ellison had a very eloquent and very dangerous in an elevator in New York City, and I had a name tag on there, and my last name is spelled O-C-H-S-E, and he poked me in the chest really hard several times, like stitching my letters of my name to my chest. He said, "What's that name? What's that name?" And I said, "It's Weston Ochse, Mr. Ellison." He said, "Weston Ochse, what do you do?" I said, "I'm a horror author, Mr. Ellison." And he's like, "Ha, ha, 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 that's a perfect name for a horror author. It sounds like a nursing home where people go to die. It sounds like a trailer park at the end of the road, Weston Ochse. That's great." So when you see my name, it's Weston Ochse. I'm the author of about 30 books. The last 6 were military sci-fi, military horror. I did the SEAL Team 666 series with Thomas Dunn Books, St. Martin's Press, one of the Big Fives, Simon Schuster. That's been optioned by The Rock to be a movie, so we're all hoping that that's going to happen. And then my current series is with Solaris out of UK, and that's the Grunt Life series. It has PTSD and alien invasion and all that good stuff. Other than that, I live in Arizona with my 3 Great Danes and my wife and fellow author, Yvonne Navarro. And starting in January, I'm going to be going on an all-expenses-paid trip back to Afghanistan for 6 months because I'm still in the military.
Now, which branch of the military did you say?
I'm not in a branch. I work with an agency. We have our own job over there. And in fact, I'm getting scheduled for drive and shoot training here in a little bit because, of course, you forget how to drive and shoot at the same time because you can't walk and chew gum at the same time either. So they actually spend 2 weeks of taxpayers' money training me how to do that. So yeah, it's going to be fun. In all truth, it's my second time over there, and last time it was a blast. I had a great time. Basically what my job is to make sure that all the soldiers and sailors and airmen out there are safe.
So Wes, you take that training, I'm sure, and put it into your stories. You write about military style warfare, be it paranormal or what have you. I'm sure that bleeds into your writing, right?
It does. I'm told all the time by fans that my writing seems so real. Everything in there, a lot of them have been in the military, and they're like, I can tell you've been in the military. I can so relate to this because this is exactly how I felt, or this is exactly how we talk, or this is, et cetera, et cetera. And I just feel fortunate because I've read some guys who've never been in the military, but their stuff reads great to me as well. It's just my shortcut is having done that, so I don't have to create it. I always tell people that I really admire nonfiction writers because they actually know what they're doing, whereas fiction writers, we just have to make it up.
We have to make it up, but we have to make it believable.
Yeah, we do, absolutely.
Now, Beth, you also write books with warfare in them as well. How do you go about writing combat or fight scenes?
Well, I haven't had to write any battle scenes in a kind of an epic sense, but I do have fight scenes in there, and my heroines tend to be, they're not expert fighters necessarily. In my Clockwork Dagger books, Octavia she's a magician. She's a doctor and a magical healer, and she can shoot when she needs to, but she'll also go and try and heal the guy who she just shot. That's the nature of who she is. In my new series, Ingrid is a geomancer, so she eventually is using how to use earth power, at first as kind of a shielding mechanism, but she does gain more offensive skills as the series goes on. And yeah, I don't have combat experience. I've never done martial arts. I love martial arts. I mean, my son can attest, he's 12, and I have it on, on the weekend, we have it on LRA channel, and I'm showing him, Bruce Lee movies and things like that. He's at that age where I can get him into that. But yeah, I have a great interest in that stuff, but I don't have that personal experience, and that's when having beta readers and my editor read it, because they can help me catch some of those errors.
Absolutely. You mentioned one of your characters is, you said a magician, so I'm assuming that's medical doctor.
Yeah, that's what her world, that's what they call it. She's a frontline battlefront doctor, but she also can magically heal, so she has both skill sets. She can heal without her magic or with her magic.
So I'm assuming then when you go to your beta readers, you're saying pay attention to these spots here with the medical references to make sure that they're accurate as can be, right?
Absolutely. And my editor actually had to ding me sometimes because I get in trouble for being too graphic with my medical scenes sometimes. So sometimes I actually have to dial it back a bit.
I hear you. My most recent release, I do mostly indie right now, but my most recent release, I went to my brother, who is a physician's assistant, and I had asked him, I said, what kind of trauma type things do you run into in the hospital? What's the worst thing you've run into? And he talked about doing a burr hole in somebody's head to relieve pressure. And I said, how do you do that? I want to write about that. And it ended up going into my most latest book. I was like, you know what? I want to drill a hole in someone's head. Let's do this. And so I was working very closely with him and a few other medical professionals that I know to make sure that I accurately described it without making people want to throw up.
And it's a tough balance sometimes with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Drilling holes in people's heads used to be a thing. It was called trepanning.
Yep.
And they used to do it back at the turn of the 19th century. It would make them smarter, they thought. And it would help them live longer.
Yeah, I wonder how that turned out.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's a pretty disgusting process too. But let's switch over now. We talked about the stories that you guys have written. Let's talk about how you got them published. Now, both of you have worked with Big Five publishers and smaller presses. What was the start for you? Did you initially say, I'm going to query, I'm going to do traditional publishing? Did you kind of just test the waters? How did you start in this process?
Well, I started out, I always wanted to be a novelist. That from the time I was 4 years old, I wanted to be an author when I grew up. So when my son was a baby and I was home alone and my husband was still in the Navy then, he was deployed, and I was like, okay, I'm miserable. I need to go back and revive my childhood dreams and start writing again. So I started slow with that, and I started working on some novels, and I did NaNoWriMo, which was huge as far as getting me to start writing again. And then I started to actually get feedback on it, but it took me a couple years to actually get the courage for that. And I found out my books sucked. Good ideas, but it was not cohesive. It didn't work. It wasn't marketable. It didn't fit into any genre. So I started to go back and like, okay, I need to kind of start with the basics and learn how to write sellable material. So I picked up a number of Writer's Digest books, looked at advice online, started following author blogs. This was about 2007, 2008, and learned. And I realized, okay, I'm going to start working on short stories to prove that I can get published in some form, and maybe I'll even get a couple bucks here and there. So I started doing short stories, working on, For the Love publications first, then, semi-pro, and still working on novels the whole time, and kept working and getting more publications. Finally had a pro short story sale, kept working up from there, rewrote a novel I really believed in 2 times from scratch to make it work. And that novel led me to my agent.
I've never heard of somebody writing a novel twice from scratch. That's good. That's good.
Inspiration is what it was.
See, I would say dedication, not desperation, but I mean, that's a really long process to get where you were, and you found a lot of success with that too. So that's excellent.
Yeah, the book that I connected with my agent with was an urban fantasy, and it didn't sell.
Oh.
So I had another big blow with that, and at that point I started working on Clockwork Dagger, and that was my litmus test. It was, if I am a novelist, I'm going to make this novel work, and I'm going to make it sell. And by golly, we ended up having 3 offers for it.
Wow, that's awesome. See, now that's something that we don't normally get to see. When we talk with a lot of the authors that we've talked with in the past on Spilling Ink, most of them have been indie or small press. And indie, obviously, you can go at your own pace. You do the job to get the book out however you're going to do it. And one of the things we stress is quality, quality, quality. Take your time to do it. But with the traditional side of it, there is a lot of time that it's devoted to just trying to get somebody to look at your manuscript and trying to sell it. And that's something I think that our listeners and our viewers really need to understand is you've got to be in it for the long haul if you really want to make this work.
Yeah, and it can be soul-wrenching. I mean, the querying process, I thought, that was excruciating. Just the anxiety every day, staring at your email, hoping for anything, a sign that, I'm here, I exist. Please acknowledge that I sent you this query, and maybe request some pages, partial, if, please. It's horrible.
I'm right there right now, actually. I've got a novel that I had written intending to try and find an agent and sell traditional. And I've been doing indie for the last, almost 10 years. And now I want to try the other side of it. And I'm already at the nail biting, haven't even, gotten a lot out yet. And I'm already nail biting and waiting to see if I'm going to hear anything back. And it's gut wrenching. And I just know the first few rejections that come through are going to be, stabs to the heart.
It is when you work on a novel. They always say it's not personal, but when it's something that you've put that much effort and love into, it hurts. There's no getting around that.
Yeah, because your self-worth in a way is almost tied to your art.
Absolutely. And it does make you vulnerable.
Be, but for an artist, it very much is. So Wes, we've kind of ignored you for a minute. Let's hear some of your story on how your path to publication started.
Sure. So I turned 30 and I did what I thought everybody did. And it turns out I'm the only one who did it. Is I looked behind and thought about all those things that I'd done and I want to stop. And I tried to stop them. And then I looked forward and looked at all those things I wanted to do and hadn't yet done. And one is I wanted to be an author. I was published one time when I was 7 years old in the school newspaper. It was a pretty graphic story called What Became of Charlie. It was a morality tale to do what your mother says, because she said, don't take a shortcut to school and buy a bear. And I think the problem was the page is describing exactly how the bear ate Charlie, to the point that the PTA actually called for the copies of the paper to be returned to the school. So I was basically banned on my first publication, but I kind of knew I had something. So I turned 30 and I decided to write. So like Beth, I wanted to be a novelist. So I began writing this novel, and I got about 80, 90 pages into it. I'm like, this is genius. This is just pure genius, right? And then for some reason, for 6 months went by and I didn't do anything. And I came back to it, and then I saw that it really sucked. It was bad. It was terrible. So what I decided to do was write short stories, perfect what I could writing in the short form, because you have a lot fewer places to make mistakes. In novels you can make mistakes and kind of get away with it, but in short stories you can't, because it's just right there. So, and at the time my definition of being an author was to be professionally paid. I didn't know that there was any other choice. I didn't know that there was an indie author. I didn't know any of that. It was professionally paid. So I would go to Raylan.com or someplace like that, and I would look at the pro markets, and I would begin at Weird Tales and move down. And so thus began a 2-year process of me writing short stories and getting rejected. My first rejection was from Daryl Schweitzer, the editor-in-chief of Weird Tales, and it was a 7-page rejection for a 6-page story. So at least I got some pretty good feedback. But 42 rejections later, I made my first pro sale. And then after that, I made 18 sales in a year. So really my first 5 years of publication was nothing but short stories. But by the time I had my first novel published, I had 50 professional short story sales. And I think that really helped me in my writing. Fast forward. Well, no, let me stay there. So on my first novel, it was a small press. And then really my next 10 or 15 books were kind of small, medium press books, anywhere from 350 to 5,000 book print runs. And some of them made it into the big box stores. Some of them didn't make it into big box stores. But, you know, the thing is I wasn't doing the marketing they were, because I really suck at marketing. I would be a terrible seller of anything. I couldn't sell air to a drowning man. I mean, I'm terrible at that kind of stuff. But along the way, I met people, and you know, my grandpa and a lot of other people in my life one of the things they've always told me is don't be an asshole. Make sure that people know who you are and make sure that they know that you're nice. So along the way, I met a lot of people. And it was right after Osama bin Laden had been captured that I got an email from Brendan Deneen at St. Martin's Press. And he said, here's a title of a book. Give me an idea and you can write it. And so I didn't even have to pitch them. I just wrote up an idea, and next thing you know, I had a 3-book deal with St. Martin's Press, and that just worked great. But see, I had met Brendan 3 or 4 other times along the way, and I had helped him out, and we had interacted. And also because of my sales with Abaddon Books, which is a worldwide seller, he knew that I was known and I had a lot of quality with my writing. So I guess my professional behavior was my own agent at that point, even though I had an agent. I'm currently on my 4th agent, by the way. And then based upon the success of those 3 books, the editor-in-chief of Solaris emailed my agent and said, we want something from Weston. So I've been very fortunate in my last 7 books now, because I haven't had to pitch anything. It's just the way I've done business, and they like that, and they appreciate it, and they see that I'm a professional. So I feel really fortunate for that. Now, do I have an on-spec novel out with my agent? Oh, hell yeah. I have an on-spec novel that's been completed, and 5 or 6 pitches that she is circulating throughout the Big 5 and other places. And yeah, like Beth said, you know, when your perfect, brilliant novel gets rejected, you're like, this is a stake to my heart. And then of course you go, well, they just must not know what they're talking about, because they clearly don't understand the market like I do, you know. So, but although I've been fortunate, my last 6 books, I'm still at that point where I still have an agent who's still trying to sell my stuff, because the problem with the Big 5 and some of the other ones is that the agents are the gatekeepers. They don't allow unagented submissions, and it sucks, but you know, they don't have enough time, and I think they feel that it's the agent who is their filtering mechanism, because if an agent decides that your work is good enough to be represented, then they'll at least give it a try.
Let's talk about that for a second, because it's kind of an unknown for the authors that are looking towards making a publishing decision, whether they go indie, whether they go traditional. The agent kind of seems like the end all be all. Once you get the agent, you're golden, but clearly that's just one step towards getting the publishing, or to getting that deal with a publisher. So once you've gotten the agent, what is that working relationship like? How do they go from the agent saying, yes, I like your work, I want to work with you, to getting to a publisher? What happens then?
It depends on your agent. It depends on the agency. It's not all the same. I know people who have agents who will read the book, and the agent will have the author rewrite the book based upon their input and based upon their read of the market, and based upon their idea of what certain editors and certain houses want. I don't have one of those agents right now. Sometimes I wish I did, because when you're writing on spec, you kind of feel lost, because you don't know if you're writing something that everybody else is writing because of this zeitgeist thing that goes on, or if you're being totally original. I know the reason I'm on my 4th agent is because my first couple agents, I felt like they weren't right for me for certain reasons. My third agent, I felt that I had outgrown him, and my fourth agent actively sought to bring me into her pool. And one of the things I didn't want to be is I didn't want to be like the top person in that agent's agency. I wanted to be somewhere in the middle. You know, I wanted that person to be trying to work for me and being as dogged as possible. That said, she and I work together very well. We correspond every week. I ask her what's going on. I ask for feedback because, you know, for new authors, and this is an important thing to understand, the agent works for you. You don't work for the agent. And so you can tell the agent what you want them to do, who you want them to send it to, and that with the expectation that the agent does that. And if they don't do that, then you could relook your relationship with that agent. Beth?
Yeah, I completely agree. I've only had the one agent. I'm with Rebecca Strauss at DeFiore and Company, and I love her. And communication styles vary with different agents, just like with any individual. And I have an agent who is very communicative. We do almost all through email and on a fairly regular basis. And, you know, there will be, when there's activity, when something goes wrong or something good is happening, there'll be a flurry of emails there. And we typically talk on the phone a couple times a year. You know, usually when it's a transition time or when there's news, things like that. And yeah, agents are very powerful. When you are querying, the agent does look like the end all. You think that, oh, when I have an agent, you know, it's it, you know, this is it. Like Katie said, you know, I'm golden here. And the reality is it's not that easy. I mean, it's a good agent isn't with you just for the book you sign with. They're with you for the career. And most agents, a good agent's going to tell you that straight up. They are with you through thick and thin. They will fight for you and they will have your back. I call my agent my superhero because I think, you know, she doesn't need a cape, but man, if she has to fight, I know she will have my back in any situation. But when you're just starting out, and I've heard many people say a bad agent is worse than having no agent at all, because a bad agent will really blow your chances with publishers, because you can't keep submitting to the same publishers. Once your book has been seen by this editor, they can't really look at it again. So it makes a big difference to know that you have a good feeling about the agent and connect with them. And yeah, but the good news is, like, you know, like Wes shows, you can have many different agents and it's not the end of the world. You just kind of move on.
It sounds like it's a good working relationship that can end when it's not working for either party, right?
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this, because like I said before, I'm kind of in that spot where I'm starting to look at agents and sending queries out. The new agent versus the old agent. You know, you've got the more established agents who clearly will have established connections within publishing houses versus the newer agents who maybe are hungrier for new material. Now, for me right now, I'm kind of setting, you know, the bar very wide, and I'm looking for people who are representing the genres that I'm looking at. But I haven't yet, you know, said, well, I'm going to go this way or this way, because I'm not sure which side I should be looking at.
They both have advantages and disadvantages. And like you said, a hungry agent, they're building their list. They still may know every editor in the business, because if they're in New York City, they know, you know, they may have all those connections already. Whereas an established agent may have 50 clients, and they also may be doing other things within the agency. They may be doing foreign rights, or they may be, you know, helping with accounting. You don't know. I mean, they may have essentially 3 different jobs at the same time, and maybe they aren't keeping an assistant with them. So maybe they're overworked and you're going to be low priority, and it may take them 3 months to read your manuscript, things like that. So there's a definite trade-off, and that's when you do get the call and someone wants to work with you, it's within your rights to interview them. You have to have a full list of questions, and you can find lots of resources. There are blog posts online where you can find out information about what to ask in that phone call. The AAR, Agent Association of Agents, or I don't know what it stands for, but it's AAR, and they had, at least a couple of years ago, they had advice on there too about what you should ask during that phone call, and interview them and get a good vibe from them and find out, you know, they should be able to tell you, what editors do you have in mind for this project, and you can go from there.
You know, what's interesting. So I teach a class at SNHU, Southern New Hampshire University, online, and it's called English 340 Context and Publishing. Hey guys, and it's basically how to get an agent or how to get an editor and how to pitch them. And one of the tricks that I provide them is there's actually a website called the Manuscript Wish List, and there's actually a hashtag for Twitter called Manuscript Wish List. And a lot of people don't know this, but agents and editors will actually go on there and they'll say, I am looking for this kind of book. And scroll down and look at them, do a word search, see if the book that you wrote or the book that you want to write is one that they want to represent. And then it's possibly a marriage made in heaven. So that's a really nice shortcut to either publication or representation. Well, see, I always recommend that if you're going after an agent or an editor at a house to be published that doesn't require an agent, you do research on that person, stalk them, but gently. Don't go to their window, but check out their Facebook page, check out their Twitter, see if there's somebody that you want to work with, see if their politics or if they kick cats, maybe Beth doesn't want to work with them because that person's a cat kicker. We don't want cat kickers to be publishing us. So, but find out personal details so that when you write that query letter, you can include some of those details, and that person knows that you did some research on them. It really, when you cold call somebody like that, having somebody know something about you is so much better than an antiseptic, dear agent, would you represent me? I am the author of so-and-so.
Yeah, and having read the other authors that they represent is a huge thing too, to know that you can really get a good sense of an agent or an editor's taste by checking that out.
This is all good information. Like I said, our viewers too are usually aspiring authors or newer authors who may be looking at all the options within publishing, whether it be indie, small press, large press. So it's good to have that information so they can make the balanced decision on their next project. Now, let's switch over a little bit and let's talk about after you've been published, the going out and meeting the readers and doing live events. How does that get set up? Is that through your publisher, through your agent? Do you hire a publicist?
Well, in my case, through Harper Voyager, I have a very magical, awesome publicist. And she will set up a lot of things for me, not everything. But with working with some conventions, she will be the one who is doing the initial setup and meeting. And also, like if I'm doing like a book signing event, a lot of times she will be the one who organizes that. But other times it's entirely on me. I will get the direct invitation to take part in a convention and I will handle everything. So it really all depends on the situation. It goes both ways.
Yeah, when I was at St. Martin's Press, I had a publicist assigned to me, and he did some good stuff, got me into some bookstores that was really hard for me to get into on my own, which is interesting because the democratization of publication through indie publishing and print on demand versus mass market printing has made some bookstore people leery. Some of them don't want to work with small press or indie press because they feel the quality sometimes isn't as good, and they don't want to be left with books, and they just don't want to negotiate that with the bookseller. So it's like if you don't have a publicist, even an author like me who's a mid-list guy who a lot of people might know, if I call them up, they're like, let me talk to your publicist and whatever. So having a publicist was really good. Probably the best thing he did is he got me into Soldier of Fortune magazine, and I got to write an article in Soldier of Fortune magazine, which is a geeky thing that I've been reading. Like it's kind of like a cross between a comic book and like a real magazine, because half the stuff in it's not so real. But any magazine that advertises for mercenaries in the back part, is pretty badass. So I was glad to have written in that. But like Beth said, I mean, it's your reputation. People see you at conferences and they see how you interact, and they're like, hey, will you come to our conference? Will you come to our convention? And Beth, like me, we're lucky because Arizona has quite a few conventions, and we have quite a few professional authors, and we kind of all end up at the same conventions because the same organizers invite us to them. I recently went to Bubonicon in Albuquerque. I'd never been there. I'd been invited a couple times. I had a great time, but nobody knew me. So there was an hour of meet author Weston Ochse at 9 o'clock on Friday night, and I was alone for like 15 or 20 minutes, and then I used college rules and I left. So they just didn't know me. But by the end of the convention, I was talking to the convention guy, and he's like, yeah, I've had people come up and say that they want you back. And I said, well, next time they'll probably come to my thing. He said, well, yeah, they will. So it's kind of a matter of just kind of developing a grassroots fandom, you know, just hand to mouth, talking to people. Don't be an asshole. You know, be nice to them, give them cookies, and you know, they become your fans. And so I think one of the best things about Phoenix Comic Con, for instance, you know, there's a couple 100,000 people. They're great, but they give me a table that I can stand behind, and I can talk to people, and I can shake their hands, and they can look at like SEAL Team 666 and laugh at it, and then I'll laugh with them, and we'll talk about the book, you know, stuff like that. I think that's really one of the most awesome things.
Yeah, Phoenix Comic Con. That's where I actually met both of you, and any convention that I've gone to has been a really fun experience. You know, to meet the people, to meet the other authors that are around and make friends with them, as well as being able to talk to readers, being able to sit in on panels, being able to speak on panels. It's a really eye-opening experience, you know, both engaging as well as just being there and kind of people watching. And of course, you know, the friendships that you make when you're there too. I'm from Vegas, and we kind of have a similar thing. A lot of the Vegas authors tend to run into each other over and over again at different events. We all kind of know each other. But reaching out to go to Phoenix was a whole new experience, new authors to meet, new people I hadn't talked to before, new connections. And it's kind of interesting. And I think, you know, each year, if I go back next year, hopefully people remember me from the year before, and I'll be able to work, like you said, Wes, and make that grassroots effort of building up a fandom. Speaking of that, panels actually helps a lot in that recognizable, you know, you're up there as, you know, as an expert when you're talking on a panel, whether you are or not. For me, it was trial by fire. It was my first experience doing major panels versus little tiny, you know, one-off panels with maybe 10 people in the audience. So it was very much trial by fire, but it was interesting after the fact to have people come down to the booth and say, yeah, I saw you on that panel. I loved what you had to say about this or that. And it became a talking point for me to make friends with new readers.
Yeah, the panels at Comic-Con are a lot different than the panels at a regular convention. I mean, you know, at Comic-Con, you can have 200 people sitting in the audience. And whereas in normal conventions, you might have 20, 25, more like 10, 15. So it's definitely a greater, broader reach. And, you know, it's sort of an honor to be invited to Phoenix Comic-Con because they have a lot of choices in who they want to put on Author's Row. So to be able to do that is definitely pretty cool. And I always make sure that before and after every convention, I make it my most to thank them because, you know, they're our hosts and they're asking us to come help represent and as small a draw as I am to bring my fans to Comic-Con as well. And I think I'm getting more benefit than they are. So I appreciate the fact that they invite me.
Yeah, it is really cool just to be there and kind of be part of it. And I went from being a fan attendee of Phoenix Comic-Con for several years. And then in 2014, when Clockwork Dagger was a few months from coming out, there I was as a panelist. So it was really neat to suddenly be on the other side of the room and to make friends with the authors and kind of instead of being the aspiring author in the audience at the, you know, the debut authors panel, I was the one up there doing the talking so that I've got to experience the full range there. And then just cool stuff like walking what I call the ninja roads and go in the back hallways of Phoenix Comic-Con and take the
Those are great.
downstairs. And I love that. That just, it's like, I'm a little kid every time I do that.
So I love the part where you're going through and then you open the door and you're in the food court and people stop eating. They look at you and they can't figure out who you are, what you're doing as you cross. And then you open up another door and you continue on. They're like, who was that person? Are they important? What's going on?
Well, they must be important if they open that door.
Right. And they're not unlocked. Anybody can open the doors. I mean, these are unlocked doors.
Well, but they do typically have guards there. And I make sure my badge is visible. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's hilarious.
There's that little, you know, feeling of being special.
One of my favorite
I was
times.
scared to death on the first day, absolutely shaking before I walked into that first panel, seeing how packed the room was.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Katie, I was going to share one of my favorite Phoenix Comic-Con memories. And this is a memory when I wasn't at Phoenix Comic-Con. So it was like 2011, I think, maybe 2012. And so I'm in the military. I've been in the military for about 34 years. And I occasionally get deployed, or I occasionally have to go on temporary duty assignment somewhere. In this case, I was supposed to be at Comic-Con, and they had arranged it so that me and Elvira were going to judge the zombie costume contest, and just sitting there with Elvira was going to be very cool, I thought. And then the government sent me to Romania for something, and Yvonne has a history of doing this thing where she has Weston on a stick. So she has like a paint stirrer, and then a cutout of me, and then she tapes me to it. And so I appear at the conventions that I'm supposed to be at, but I'm not. So it's her and Weston on a stick. So I'm kind of there as a totem, I suppose. So I couldn't make Phoenix Comic-Con, and the people who run the green room are my friends, and they know me. So what they did is all the friends who worked at the convention and several of the major stars held up a picture of me on a stick and a picture of Yvonne on a stick, because Yvonne didn't go to Comic-Con because I didn't. So because of that, you had both of us on a stick. So it's like right now I'm looking at a picture of Michael Rooker holding me and Yvonne on a stick while flipping off the world, which is just a stunning thing. Or the antithesis of Michael Rooker, Dr. Wesley Crusher, holding us as well, you know. So it's so funny, and it's just the fact that the people at the convention took time out to do that for me, and then sent the email to me. It was just fantastic. It's like, here it is, Weston on a stick. That's awesome.
And that all stems from not being an asshole and making friends, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, there are so many assholes in this world that they don't need another one.
Amen to that. But it's true though, because as big as the world is, it's really not that huge. And especially in publishing circuits, you run into the same people over and over again.
Oh,
and
yeah.
if you establish yourself as being a jerk, it's going to get around. Same thing if you're, somebody who's really cool and easy to deal with and, a hard worker, then they'll want you back.
I have people who actually come up to me and ask for cookies. They will be a total stranger to me, and, oh, do you have cookies? Yeah, no idea who you are, but here you go. And that's a reputation I can live with.
I love that, though. I think that is so sweet that you bring cookies everywhere. And not just any cookies. I mean, we're not talking just general chocolate chip cookies. You've got some serious recipes on there.
Oh, yeah, I do my own custom recipes. At conventions, I'm most famous for my chewy honey maple and my chewy honey snickerdoodle recipes. Those are my two big favorites right now that people go crazy for. And I have the recipes on my website.
Now, I will put the website in the description below so that people who watch can find that.
Okay.
Because they definitely need to look at the cookies. We've got a tradition at Christmas time that we do cookies for all the kids' teachers, and my oldest has 6 teachers right now. Mm-hmm. And my middle child just started school, and so he's got, I think, another 6-ish teachers, if you count all the specials teachers they have. So we'll be cooking like mad this Christmas. So I will be hitting your website for sure.
Well, awesome. Yeah, there's a lot on there, and I have a full range of, different textures and tastes and all that stuff. And I have some non-cookie recipes too. I do crock pot recipes, gluten-free desserts, a bit of everything, but the cookies get most of the attention.
Now, do you have a cookbook at all?
No, but people keep asking for that.
Well, it's like the next progression. You build all of your recipes and you put them into a book. So
yeah, I need to do that. I need to start doing ebooks of cookies because people keep requesting that.
There you go.
I worked with this one publishing company. It's defunct now, but it was an idea where they were going to publish a book every 6 weeks in a shared universe. Mm. And my novel in there is called Red Palm. But this is what they did is they got all the authors to contribute recipes to recipe book. And of course, because this is fantasy and horror, each recipe has to be different. So I had just made for Super Bowl Sunday, I had made clams with chorizo, right? And so instead I changed the recipe to clams with chupacabra. And so I wrote the whole recipe based upon, how to cook the chupacabra and everything else. So one of the partners in this lives in New York City, and he drops his kid off at the same daycare center that Iron Chef Alex Guanacelli drops her kid off. And so I guess as they're standing there, waiting on their kids, he kind of mentions this cookbook, and he mentions this whole clams with chorizo or clams with chupacabra, and she goes, minced, I bet. And sure enough, it was minced chupacabra with clams. Absolutely. So
Iron Chef approved.
Julie is an Iron Chef.
That's pretty awesome.
That is so cool.
So we've got, two chefs now here with all
No,
the
no, no,
recipes.
no. I'm not the chef. She's the baker extraordinaire.
So, all right, we've talked about the journey to publishing. We've talked about reaching out to your audience through live events and through doing panels. What's next for you guys? Do you have anything in the works, anything that's recently published, anything that you're hoping to be sending out soon?
Call of Fire just came out. It's the second book in my trilogy. The third book is Roar of Sky, and that will be out sometime next fall from Harper Voyager. And then I have my short story and poetry collection, Red Dust and Dancing Horses, and that comes out in November, on November 7th. Pre-orders actually just started on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And if people are attending World Fantasy Con in San Antonio, I'm actually going to be releasing the book early there, and people can buy it there from Fairwood Press and get it signed right there at the convention.
That was the one you posted earlier today with the really cool mechanical horse on the cover?
Yeah, the full cover debuted today.
That is gorgeous. I saw that. I was like, that's just pure awesomeness right there.
Yeah, I love
it. I want to go see that. That sounds magical.
It's really cool looking.
It's by a Japanese artist, and he did the cover art for another Fairwood Press book by Tina Conley that has this really cool, like a cyborg head, front and back. And yeah, and it turned out he had a steampunk horse, and he was willing to tweak it for the cover, and it's gorgeous. I am so happy with that cover. I'm still giddy, and I've known about it for 6 months, but it still makes me feel so happy.
Oh, how do you keep that under your hat for so long? Oh, I'm not a good secret keeper. I wouldn't be able to do it.
Well, if you're going the traditional publishing route, you have to learn how to keep secrets like that, and that's one of the most frustrating things is when you finally have that super good news, like getting an agent or getting a call from a publisher. You may have to keep that secret for 4 to 6 months before you can reveal what happened. It has to wait until the official publishing announcement comes out, Publishers Weekly, and it is the most frustrating thing.
That's rough. The good thing, though, about being an author who's been working for so long is I'm constantly working on different projects.
Yeah.
So, as I'm sending this current one out, I'll have something else to keep my mind occupied because I'll be working on the next new project. And, I still intend to do indie publishing for certain book series, but I'm trying to lean towards traditional for things that I feel are more marketable towards the traditional side. I want to do that hybrid model.
And that works. That's a good way to go. And it really means a lot to stay busy like that, because like I said earlier, if you're just there staring at your email, waiting for a response to your queries, it is very depressing, and it can be very dangerous in that way. It really does help to stay busy.
Yeah. Well, like we said, your self-worth is often tied to your art. So that waiting makes you feel like, oh, well, I wasn't important enough to respond to. And then if you get a rejection, oh, well, I suck. I'm terrible. I'm a horrible writer. All those negative emotions come out. So yeah, definitely you have to keep busy. You have to always have something in the works. And that's something we stress a lot to the authors that we talk to is you've always got to have something else to work on. You can't just rely on one project to be the end all be all for you. Yeah. You have to keep writing. How about you, Wes? What do you got coming up?
Well, before I jump into that, let me tell you a story about how I didn't keep a secret once and I screwed everything up. Okay, because I think it's important. This is even before I published my first novel. I've been a screenwriter for a long time as well. Won a couple international screenwriting awards. Never had anything made into a movie, but I've had some attention. So my very first screenplay, somehow my agent gets it into Amun-Ra Entertainment, which at the time was Wesley Snipes' company before he went to jail. But back in the early Blade days when everything was hunky-dory and good. And I got a call the morning of, it was the BEA when the Book Expo of America was in Los Angeles. I got a call that morning and said, Weston, guess what? This guy, his executive assistant has it. And people don't even know this guy's name unless he contacts you, because he's like the secret gatekeeper for Wesley Snipes. So I'm like floating on cloud nine, and I go to the convention, and my publisher at the time, Medium Rare Books, they had paid like $15,000 for a center stage kiosk, which is very expensive at the Book Expo. For those who don't know, the Book Expo is like 400,000 or 500,000 people, and it's more a trade show where booksellers try and sell to distributors and stuff like that, and they bring the authors there so the authors can, here's a real life author, you can touch them. And so I'm talking about my book, and then in slinks this guy in a sharkskin suit, and he's this Hollywood type. He's like sniffing at me. What do you have? What do you have? Make, intentionally trying to make me feel really low. I said, well, I have this book, and I just read the book, and it's like, yeah, whatever. What else? And I said, well, I do have this other thing, and I told him about Fight Club. I told him this guy's name, and the minute I mentioned his name, his eyes lit up, and he looked at me like he was impressed with me, and suddenly I was somebody to him. He's like, really? Huh, interesting. And I felt like I won that confrontation. And then went to bed that night, woke up the next morning to a phone call, and he said, for my agent, she said, Weston, what in the F did you do? Because this guy was a Hollywood agent who called up that guy, and he said, I'm just fact checking. Are you really looking at this? And the guy said, not anymore. So I could have had a movie made on my very first script by Wesley Snipes. And I totally jacked that up because of my freaking ego. And you have to realize, as an author, you gotta put the ego in check. You can't put stuff out until, like you said, until your agent says so, until your publisher says so, or until it's in print. I mean, I knew that The Rock was interested in SEAL Team 666 4 weeks before it was officially put out, and only then did it come out from Hollywood Reporter. So I mean, I couldn't say anything, but knowing that was great. You just can't say it. But keeping it to wraps, like Beth said, and like Katie said, so hard to do. I'm sorry, you asked me what I have coming out. Okay, sorry about that. So I have the SEAL Team.
Really good story.
So I have the SEAL Team 666 series. It's military supernatural about a special group of SEALs that kills monsters for America. Go America. And then I have FUBAR, which is a collection of short stories and essays. Most of the essays I wrote when I was in Afghanistan in 2013. Basically, all my short stories, genre short stories, that deal with warfare in some way or another. And that's a collection called FUBAR from Cohesion Press. I just love the title. And then I have the Grunt Life series. I wanted to write military sci-fi because there's a lot of great military sci-fi authors out there. And Joe Haldeman is, to me, one of my idols. And so, but I wanted to do something different. So what I did is I made all of my characters have PTSD to some degree, and it's all pretty severe. So they're all messed up in the head. But their PTSD helps them better able to fight the aliens, because the aliens have a certain version of mind control that the PTSD can defeat. So it's necessary to have them like that. But just to talk about it for a second, once I wrote the first one, the publisher said, Weston, this is the bleakest book we're ever going to publish. We've never published a book like this before. And we were kind of afraid, is this going to be a trigger? Or is this going to be something that someone can go to? Where's that fine line? And we published it because no one said it out loud, but had he said, Weston, let's just not publish this, I might have said, okay, you're probably right. But I'm glad he didn't, because we published it, and it great acclaim. I mean, veterans groups, parents. I once had a father email me through my website, and it was pretty personal. And I asked him if I could share it, and he said I could. I'm just not going to give his name. But there's a section in there where one of the PTSD sufferers, Michelle, she's a soldier, and she was a cutter when she was younger, and she did self-harm. And my main character asked her, why did you do this? And she explains why she did this. And this father says, I asked my daughter to read that paragraph, and she read it and turned to me. She said, yeah, Dad, that's exactly why I do it to me. And he said, for the first time, I understand why my daughter does this. And I'm like, holy smokes, how does this old white guy figure this stuff out? I somehow, through osmosis and research, I was able to do it. So anyway, I totally messed up Earth in all 3 books. There's no hope. It's just totally messed up, because really, if aliens come down to invade, they're not going to catch the flu. It's not like that. It's not water. They're going to tear us up. So I did that. And then a couple other things that I've done this year. So I've got to work on 4 different franchises. I've written short stories for the X-Files, for Predator, which is still to come out, for Aliens, which just came out, and then for Hellboy, which just came out as well, which is very cool. This is a franchise I've loved and I've always wanted to be a part of. And DC Comics is trying to resurrect its horror line. I grew up reading scary DC Comics, and there aren't anymore. So this October 31st, DC Comics has a brand new horror comic where they took 7 or 8 of seven or eight horror authors, and they gave them their main characters, and they said totally mess them up. So like Ed Lee has Superman, Brian Keene has Batman. I had Shazam, and I could do with them what I wanted to. So it's going to be a dark comic book where we totally just messed all these characters up, and hopefully messed them up in such a bad way that readers are going to say, we want book 2.
Now, when is that expected to come out?
October 31st, Halloween.
Man, not long then. Not long. That sounds really fun.
It does. And being able to work in comic books has been like a lifelong dream, and being able to do it in DC is like, holy smokes. I mean, when does that get to happen, right? Totally living the dream. And it's all because I'm partly talented and I'm not an asshole.
I think that's going to be our tagline for this episode. Don't be an asshole. But you guys have been really awesome. Seriously, both of you. It's been wonderful to talk to you. We're coming towards the end here, so I just want to close out the show with just one final talking point, and that is just a quick, what was your best memory or best experience so far in your publishing journey?
Oh, gosh, that's a hard one.
Dang it, that was supposed to be easy.
There's something amazing and validating about actually seeing your name by itself on the binding of a book. I've been in a lot of anthologies. Like I said, I started out getting the short story publications, and I've been in also nonfiction like Chicken Soup for the Soul. But seeing my first novel and seeing my name there on the cover like that, it is a dream come true. It's the thing, you know, when I was 4 years old and you know, I was going to grow up and be an author illustrator, and, you know, my name was going to be on the cover, and seeing that, it's like, okay, no, it's like no matter how many rejections I get, and trust me, I still get regular rejections on short stories and poems. It's like, they can't take this away from me. I made it this far. I have the book. Here's the proof. I will wallop you upside the head with it. I may need to wallop myself upside the head sometimes when I have bad imposter syndrome, but there is proof that I did this. And that feeling never goes away. I mean, my 4th novel just came out, and every time it's still just an amazing feeling to see that and feel that and walk around the house petting it for about an hour after it arrives. Come on, do you pet your books, Wes?
You know.
Admit it, you're a book sniffer. You open the binding and you smell the pages.
Well, we all do. I once took a picture. So I won the Bram Stoker Award early on in my career, and I took a picture of the Bram Stoker Award, a glass of scotch, and 2 naked Barbies, and I posted it with the tagline, "I don't know what my award does when I'm away, but it does something." My favorite thing, I believe, is kind of getting welcome to the club. 2 of my favorite authors that I never thought I would ever get to meet, I have spent such serious personal quality time with that it's just, I mean, this is like heart filling for me. So Peter Straub, who to me is just, you know, he's the literary icon. He's a god. He and I have spent so much time together, just, you know, shooting the shit. I remember he and I drinking martinis until we couldn't walk in Austin at the World Horror Convention, just kind of laughing and giggling and having a great time, just like 2 guys, you know. Not that I'm that guy who read him and idolized him. Now suddenly we're 2 guys. Or me and Steve Donaldson, you know, who wrote like an epic fantasy series, you know, the White Gold Wielder and all those books. And even just this last month at BubanCon, that was like 3rd time we'd been together. But it's like whenever we get together, it's like we're brothers. We've been friends for life. We just start talking and sit down. And to me, not only does it show that we're all human and we're just all people, you know, the author might be a great super author, but he's still just like the rest of us. But it also means that, you know, we're now a tribe. You know, we have our own little tribe where yeah, people can come and they can be a member, but the price is publishing, you know, and the price is not being an asshole. And if you can manage to do 2 of those things, you get to meet those authors that you idolize, and you know, you get to be their equal. And I think that's just amazing.
Yeah, I have to agree. You know, being out there at conventions, even scared to death as I was at Phoenix, being able to hang out with all the other authors, it was kind of like, I'm with my people. I love this. You know, because the creative types, we're all kind of similar in a way, even though we write different things, we have different experiences. We're all kind of, you know, we're all kind of geeky and fun, I think.
And we speak our own language. We know the references. We know we've read a lot of the same books. We can geek out together about, you know, silly little things. And yeah, I mean, it's an amazing bonding process. And even if, like, you know, you're talking about being kind of scared and intimidated, you know, the first day of the con. I mean, at this point, I've been doing cons for a couple of years, but it's like I'm sitting next to this person like I'm their equal, and it's like, and I'm feeling like, oh, I so totally shouldn't be here next to them, but I am. And yeah, it's cool and it's intimidating, but it's amazing just to be part of a family, really.
Absolutely. And it's a great note to end our show on this week. So I want to say thank you to both of you for, you know, being willing to come on the show and talk to us about your experiences and share with our audience your journey to publishing and what we can expect, the good and the bad, for those of us who are looking at querying right now.
Yeah, thank you, Katie.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have been able to meet you guys at Phoenix, and I'm so glad that you guys were willing to come on the show. And for all of our viewers, I'm going to be putting all of their links at the bottom of this video so that you can find them online, stalk them on Facebook, make new friends, and find out about Beth's cookies. And until next week, we will see you guys. And next week, I will have 2 new authors. And I believe Jason should be back as my co-host. He always gets a laugh. Until then, guys, bye.